Shaun of the Dead might just be the greatest romantic British comedy involving zombies that you're ever likely to see. Released in 2004 and written by Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, who also directed, Pegg stars as Shaun, a 29-year-old shop assistant whose life and relationship is going nowhere, as he'd rather spend most of his time playing video games and getting drunk with his rude and crude roommate Ed, played by Nick Frost. When Shaun's girlfriend breaks up with him, he sets out to try and get her back. But it just so happens that a zombie apocalypse has also broken out in London, where our main characters must team up and try to survive, and not get torn apart by pesky zombies, whom have a taste for carnage, in this hilarious zombie spoof, which, although was meant to be a satirical love letter to the zombie genre, would actually go on to become one of the greatest zombie movies of all time. And it's now 20 years old. That's insane! So, time to go to the Winchester and have a cold pint and wait for this countdown to blow over as we look into 10 things that you didn't know about Shaun of the Dead, the movie that teaches us... Wait, what does Shaun of the Dead teach us again? When all else fails, hit zombies with pool cues! Yeah! So, let's check it out. Number 10. The genesis of Shaun of the Dead started with Spaced. The true birth of Shaun of the Dead started with the British sitcom Spaced, which ran from 1999 to 2001, and just like Shaun of the Dead, the series was written by and starring Simon Pegg, as well as being directed by Edgar Wright, and even starring Shaun of the Dead co-star Nick Frost. The show, in a nutshell, is pretty much about two 20-something-year-olds moving in together and the misadventures that follow. The idea of Shaun of the Dead came about thanks to an episode called Art, in which Simon Pegg's character plays Resident Evil all night after consuming a heap of speed, which led to the character hallucinating and actually believing that he was fighting off real zombies. Edgar Wright claimed that in a cab on the way to the Spaced wrap-up party, Simon Pegg, who was also in the cab, brought up the zombie sequence from Spaced and suggested they make an entire movie around the concept of zombies. And what with Wright and Pegg both being fans of the zombie genre, the events were now set in motion for Shaun of the Dead. Number 9. Original title. One of the things that stands out to me when it comes to Shaun of the Dead is the movie's title, in which it shows the clashing of the otherwise mundane with the ridiculous premise of a zombie outbreak. The mundane, of course, being Shaun, who in this movie leads an otherwise pointless mundane existence. I also like it because we've had Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Well, look out, here's Shaun of the Dead, a title which definitely sets up that this zombie movie is more of a spoof played for laughs. However, Shaun of the Dead wasn't the original title of the movie, as Edgar Wright explains that the original one-page document describing the movie had the title of Tea Time of the Dead. Tea Time of the Dead? Seriously? Tea Time of the Dead? Okay, I get what they were trying to do, focus on the British aspect of the movie. After all, tea time is an old school British custom, but maybe for audiences outside the UK, the title may have just been a little too British. After all, in some countries, having tea means having dinner, and not necessarily having, well, tea. Either way, Shaun of the Dead is a better title. Number 8. The George A. Romero Connection. Both Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright were fans of George A. Romero's zombie movies, particularly his 1978 masterpiece Dawn of the Dead. And the movie actually features plenty of references and homages to Dawn of the Dead, as the movie even starts with a piece of musical score that was actually from the as-mentioned Dawn of the Dead. And the gruesome death of the David character is very similar to the equally gruesome death scene of the Rhodes character in Day of the Dead. However, despite being a comical take paying homage to George A. Romero's work, the big man himself, Romero, was a massive fan of Shaun of the Dead, as after having a private viewing of the movie all to himself in Florida, Romero contacted Wright and Pegg and praised the movie. In fact, Romero was such a fan, he even had Pegg and Wright appear as zombie extras in his Living Dead entry, Land of the Dead, which came out 1 year after Shaun of the Dead in 2005. Number 7. The Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy started off as a joke. These days, we all know what the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy is, as it's a series of comedy movies directed by Edgar Wright and starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, with Shaun of the Dead being a comical spin on the horror genre, Hot Fuzz being a comedic spin on the action genre, and finally World's End being a humorous take on the science fiction genre. However, how the Cornetto trilogy came to be is something of a happy accident, as it started in a scene in Shaun of the Dead where we see the Ed character eat a Cornetto after a night of drinking. This was put in as while in college, a hangover cure of Edgar Wright's was of all things, Cornettos, of which he would frequently eat them after a big night to heal his hangover, and thus Cornettos were referenced again in Hot Fuzz. And it was while on a publicity tour for Hot Fuzz that a journalist pointed out that both Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz featured Cornetto ice creams, to which Wright joked that it was indeed part of a Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, inspired by the French Three Colors trilogy that came out during the 90s. Despite the remark being a flippant joke, Edgar Wright decided to write World's End to complete his now Cornetto trilogy. And despite being wacky comedies, all these three movies have similar themes. Themes basically about growing up and taking on larger responsibilities that await you in life. Number 6. Shaun's shirt is now in a museum. Now when it comes to Shaun of the Dead, I know the big question that you're all wondering. Just what on earth happened to Shaun's iconic white shirt and red tie? Yeah, that's what you're all thinking, right? Well, when Shaun of the Dead came out, it wasn't just a little British comedy movie as anticipated. The movie was big business. It was huge and the whole world was watching. Heck, even the master of horror himself, Stephen King, got in on the craze and described Shaun of the Dead to be a solid 10 on the fun meter, and a movie that was bound to be a cult classic. Well, what better endorsement to get from the actual king of horror himself? So with arms reaching out to the movie, Shaun's shirt, which probably would have seemed just like any other irrelevant movie prop, was donated to the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, where it sits proudly on display for all fans to see and enjoy. I don't know why, but this story makes me really happy. I like to think that Indiana Jones busted his way onto the set and said, "That shirt belongs in a museum!" But yeah, I'm sure it didn't turn out that way. Who knows, it might have done. Number 5. Most of the zombie extras were spaced fans. It was something of a bumpy ride to getting Shaun of the Dead made, as Wright pitched the movie to Film 4, who decided to take on Shaun of the Dead, but then drastically cut the movie's budget right back. Wright believed in the movie and knew that it would be a hit, so for quite a while he turned down directing jobs as he was busy pitching Shaun of the Dead, trying to find finances to finance the film, to which Wright got so broke he ended up having to borrow money from his friends. He felt that if he kept taking directing jobs for TV, then Shaun of the Dead would further and further be pushed back. Thankfully, Working Title Films and Studio Canal got involved in the project, and thus Shaun of the Dead was in production. However, probably due to financial issues, most of the zombies we see in the movie aren't extras like you would think they are, but actually fans of Wright and Pegg's TV series Spaced. To get the required 200 extras needed to don heavy makeup and become zombies, there were calls to fans to apply for being zombie extras on Spaced forums and other Spaced fan websites. And it seems that the call to zombie it up worked, as Shaun of the Dead definitely does not feel low on zombies, which I guess is a testament to the Spaced fandom. Knowing all this, it's weird now watching the zombies attacking the main heroes in Shaun of the Dead, as those playing the zombies were probably fanboying and fangirling it up at the time. Number 4. Simon Pegg's grief. No doubt about it, Shaun of the Dead is a splatterfest, with limbs and other body parts flying off all over the place in all manner of grotesque fashion. And while making the film, most of the cast and crew were pretty much okay with this and had no problem with the copious amounts of death being filmed. Except for one. That being the death of Shaun's mother, Barbara, played by Penelope Wilton, aka Harriet Jones from Doctor Who. While filming the death scene, Pegg reacted as if it was his own mother who was dying. Hence, you can actually feel the raw emotion coming from Pegg in that moment, making it probably one of the only serious moments in the movie not played for laughs. In fact, both Pegg and Nick Frost were so distraught after filming, they were actually crying over the ordeal. Aww. I guess no matter how much these guys wanted to make a badass zombie comedy, they still had a soft spot for their mothers. Number 3. Fate of the Winchester. It goes without saying that Shaun of the Dead was mainly filmed around London, along with interior shots being filmed at Ealing Studios. Most of the outside filming was filmed around North London, particularly East Finchley, Highgate Finsbury Park, and Crouch End. But of course the most famous location is without a doubt the Winchester Tavern, of which is Shaun and Ed's favourite place to be and their number one place to hide and sit out the zombie apocalypse, of which is the location of the movie's memorable climax. Well, the Winchester pub is actually a Victorian-era pub called the Duke of Albany, located in New Cross, South London. So you would think that with the pub now being a national treasure, that special care would be taken to the location, and maybe even be used to entice eager tourists who are now fans of the movie and to keep it preserved, right? Well, wrong, as several years later the place closed down and got really run down. But as of 2008 it did get turned into flats. I don't know why this disappoints me, but it does. I think it's because we want the locations from our favourite movies to stay the same. But who knows, maybe they're really nice flats. Number 2. Toys and comic books. Shaun of the Dead became such an instant love classic that just 2 years later in 2006 there was an action figure lineup based on the movie, which boasted magnificent detail. Okay, they weren't action figures per se, but probably more gearing towards the collectible market. But either way, they looked great and had the likenesses down to a T, and something that every fan of Shaun of the Dead who was also a collector should seek after and get. Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright also wrote a comic book prequel to Shaun of the Dead for 2000 AD magazine called There's Something About Mary. Not to be confused with, There's Something About Mary. The comic focuses on Mary and how she became a zombie, and if you don't know who Mary is, she's the first zombie that Shaun and Ed encounter. In 2005, IDW also published a series of Shaun of the Dead comics, consisting of 4 issues, which also featured deleted scenes that didn't make it into the movie. I'm actually surprised that Shaun of the Dead hasn't had more comic book adaptations and spin-offs made about it, as the whole movie has a real comic book vibe about it. Number 1. Pop cultural impact. Despite having a limited cinematic release, it seemed that Shaun of the Dead simply hit a nerve with everyone, as it created an instant fandom of people who adore this movie. It hit a chord with everyone from Roger Ebert to Quentin Tarantino, both of whom praised the movie. Shaun of the Dead has since made it to many best comedies and best horror movie lists. Empire magazine ranked it at number 6 on a list of top 100 British movies. Channel 4 ranked it 3rd greatest comedy movie of all time, after a poll was conducted with only Monty Python's Life of Brian and Airplane beating it. Time magazine claimed it to be one of the best horror movies ever to be made, and Bloody Disgusting ranked it number 2 on best horror movies of the decade. And yes, the fact that Shaun of the Dead got praise from both Time and Bloody Disgusting just shows its widespread appeal. And if that wasn't enough, on a BBC radio show in 2011, it was ranked as the listener's 2nd favourite movie of all time, just trailing behind The Shawshank Redemption. And all this is nothing compared to all the awards that Shaun of the Dead was nominated for and won. Shaun of the Dead has become a movie now engraved in our culture, where the horror genre or modern cinema just wouldn't feel right without it. It may have been played for laughs, but it actually went on to become a very important movie. A movie that has inspired other creative people in the industry. It's a hallmark of both the horror and comedy genre, along with British cinema and cinema in general. Not bad for a movie whose original distributors clearly didn't believe in it and drastically cut its budget. Basically, I love Shaun of the Dead. It's just a fun movie with plenty of heart, memorable characters, good laughs, and extra doses of gore and carnage thrown in for good measure. And like the movie An American Werewolf in London, Shaun of the Dead proves that the horror and comedy genre can coexist hand in hand and make great cinema. It is definitely a Halloween favourite of mine, so this Halloween there are worse things you could watch out there than Shaun of the Dead. Check it out. Anyway, I'm Minty and I'm off to get a Cornetto. See ya! Ooh, yeah!